Hello! Hello! Today, we are here. The previous episode was somewhat sad, but today, we're going to laugh. Because we're going to try and understand how history can help us writing comedy. And so, somewhat between these two. Two in terms of content warnings. So, context shows up. In fact, it'll probably show up in every episode of History's Alright, apart from the intro, obviously. But, when writing comedy, context is probably even more important. Or at least, very much important. For as Red said in the Overly Sarcastic Productions episode Trope Talks Crouching Moron Hidden Badass, comedy isn't built on failure, it's built on the unexpected. Sorry for my terrible impression of Red. I just had to make sure that I made it clear which quote was hers, and you know what I mean. It can get confusing trying to work out which is which. So, that's the point. But hey, we're doing comedy, so we can have a bit of fun. Anyway, point is, a writer needs to create, or at least have, an audience with expectations. Then subvert them. Oh, and the link to the OSP, to the Overly Sarcastic Productions video I just quoted. I was quoting, that's in the description along with all my other sources for today. Now, you've probably heard of a historical event. And it's about something like this. A bucket. Now, this bucket is not that historically significant. And neither was the bucket of our first story. Until one night in the feudal era. At the time, Bologna and Modena were rivals. In a greater Italian struggle for influence between the Holy See and the Holy Roman Emperor over who dominated the Italian peninsula. It was a bit more extensive, but in Italy that was the prime focus. Now, a group of Modone's soldiers snuck into Bologna one night. They got thirsty. And, as you did in those days, you lowered a bucket down into the well and drank from it. Well, maybe not that direct. Maybe, I don't know. And then they decided to nick the bucket and took it back to Modena with them. And, well, Bologna was sort of like, no, we cannot have this. So, let us go to them. Modena, give us our bucket back. They go up to Modena like, alright, what are you doing here? Yes, I've seen that episode. The Metatron explained what this means. Link also in the description. And Bologna was like, give us back our bucket! And Modena was like, no! And so they fought each other. You know, his medieval warfare. Swords and pikes and 2,000 people dead. And at the end, properties were exchanged, but the bucket stayed in Modena. You can even see a replica in the town hall today, and the original is still stored somewhere. I believe from what I read in the sources, it's because someone tried to steal the bucket. And so it's hung from a secure in a secure location. Now, we might be thinking, oh, that's ridiculous! Fighting a war over a bucket? You know, you can understand suing them, or, you know, getting a higher authority to say, yeah, you nicked the bucket, give bucket back, or give us compensation, or what have you. But to actually go to war. However, in the world of 1325, this actually made a lot more sense. Because the going in, nicking your bucket, and going out again was actually quite an affront to Bologna's pride. And so, when they did not return the bucket, that was quite a grievous insult to the city. You know, we can take your stuff and get away with it is not something. And so how do we get that context in? Well, the observation would seem that a good way of making the context of the comedy work is to have a situation where the actions make perfect sense to the people involved, but not to the audience, but seem ludicrous to the audience. Which also probably helps avoid the kind of humour that some people deride. I mean, I know that the whole purple monkey dishwasher lol so random humour gets kind of a lot of bad stick said about it. You know, if you're writing a book or a film or what have you, that kind of comedy might seem, you know, some people might feel a bit more, but so we can get this sort of comedy out of it. Now, that's where we go further. You could also try and replace, supplant the expectations that an audience lives with in the real world and build in new ones that for your world. But to be honest, when I started writing that part of the script, I was thinking, okay, okay, this really needs its own episode. And so later on we'll do a nice little episode on context. And we're going to explore context. But now we're going to go away from Italy for a while. Not going to say where. That'll spoil the surprise. But let me tell you another story. A battle took place. Two sides. I mean, I know that's kind of usual for a battle, but you occasionally get ones where more than two armies get involved, but you know, two sides facing off against each other. Fresh and raring to go. Picnics were brought to the battle by civilians. Many people came to go watch, and they sat on a little hill to watch the battle and hear from everyone what was going on. The fighting was kind of chaotic. I mean, both sides fought well, but it's also true that both sides lacked standard flags and standard uniforms and got shot, and both sides were shooting each other. Now one side held firm and the other broke, and their soldiers had to flee the battle through the picnickers. You might think, wait a minute, that does not sound very plausible. However, I have sort of given a brief and anonymous summary of the first Battle of Bull Run, or First Manassas if you prefer. Because, hence why I didn't tell you what place we were going. Going to Virginia! I'm so out of my depth with the American Civil War. In fact, I've left sources in the description for what I've said, and I'd also recommend Atun Shea Films if you want to know more about various topics like the American Civil War. And he's fun. Anyway, more to the point. Chaos. Bringing chaos into it to create comedy. For, as we have learned, we juxtapose things. Picnics, they seem pretty normal. Battles are less common, but they're still a sort of understandable part of life, and they're not particularly funny. I mean, picnicking's not particularly humorous, if much more of a pleasant concept. But what if we combined picnicking with battle? Yes! For if we combine the picnicking with the battle, we get a juxtaposition of two things that shouldn't really make sense together. But dost thou hear the calling? For that which was mentioned before. Purple monkey dishwasher. Now yes, that's some people's cup of tea. And it's fine. I like it a little bit. I can get a bit bored of it because, well, you know, comedy isn't exact. Because when you start expecting things that are really random, you don't really get the unexpected anymore. So, we don't want to be random for random's sake. So, we need something else to make a juxtaposition work. And what is that final ingredient? Wit! Wit is where we pose a situation in which it makes sense for the juxtaposition to occur, thus bringing together chaos and context. After all, one might wonder, why would a member of Washington DC society make a trip to watch a battle? You know. Well, after all, to people at the time, war, it had a sort of romantic quality. Heroic, even, one might say, and yes, there is heroism in war. But a lot of the brutality, when you read about tales of the Napoleonic War, the heroic charges and the gallant officers and such like that, which a lot of the people at the time would have done. Done. The public imagination, these stories of Napoleonic life, which for many would, Europe felt very much a distant, far-off land for a lot of Americans at the time, in this sort of global world view of America doesn't really happen till after the First World War. Anyway, we're rambling. Let's get to the interesting part. So, the public imagination has been captured by the fact that they've read of battles and heroic generals and tactical awareness, well, tactical supremacy and brilliance, and you know what? The public has been caught up in the imagination, and now the largest force at the time assembled in North American history has marched off from Washington down to the fields of Manassas, sort of, under Richmond, boys! Avenge Fort Sumter! And put those impotent rebels in their place! Each Dixie boy must understand that he must mind his Uncle Sam! And so on and so forth. And they thought that, you know, not just it would all be over by Christmas, but it would all be over by, well, pretty much Monday morning. You know, they're going to fight the rebels and give them a decisive blow to whip Billy Yank was going to whip Johnny Rebels so hard to whip some sense into him, and the Confederacy would fall, and the Union would be saved. Hoorah, boys, hoorah! Down with the traitors and up with the stars! And so, understanding how these things fit together, we see the kind of chaos that actually makes some kind of sense with the context, when combined with the context, and we make some comedy. Well, I'd just like to thank you for watching! And hey, yeah, I had some fun overacting in this one. I think I'll probably start doing that again. I think I'll be doing that more often. But anyway, whether I continue overacting or not, it was lovely having you here!